he told me, he says, "Scott, I don't know if I'm going to keep going." And I said, "Why, Jim?" And he says, "Well, I got this bronchitis and I just, I don't feel good." And I said, "But Jim, we're only 77 miles away from Nome." And he said, "Well, I'm worried something's going to happen out there and I'm going to end up dragging somebody down with me." And I said, "Don't worry about that, Jim. We're all in it together." I said, "You're 3 hours ahead of me. I'll see you in Nome." Jim takes off on the trail. 3 hours later, I take off on the trail. I'm Scott Janssen, these days known as the Mush and Mortician. And so I learned from my dogs, if they look at something, look over there. They even saw the sunset and they'd look at it. And so anyway, they looked to their left. And I looked over to my left, and just then through the storm as I looked over, I see a dog sled facing the wrong way. And I mean way off the trail. And I hit the brakes and stopped the team, and I yelled out through the storm, "Are you all right?" And I just heard back, "I need help." My fingers were frozen. I couldn't push Jim's button on his sled. And I wrapped him in my sleeping bag, and I laid down next to him, and I was spooning him. I was laying there. I had my leg up on him. I had my arms around him, and I was rubbing him as much as I could. So he was telling me stories. I'm telling him stories. We're talking about experiences we had 30 years ago at the funeral home, because Jim is a retired pathologist. I'm an undertaker, so that's how we met. So we're talking about the wildest stuff, an undertaker and a pathologist hanging out, freezing to death on the trail. And then these 3 guys on fat tire bikes came along, and that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But they ran and got Jim's beacon out of his sled. They pushed his button. They told me too, "You got to get going. You got to get going." We pushed the button. They're going to be here. I was getting hypothermic. My eyes were starting to freeze over. I was past the point of shivering, but I was still trying to keep Jim warm laying there. And then all of a sudden, we heard a snow machine. And then it was like, boom, we're out of here. And again, I wouldn't change a thing in the world because I love the heck out of Jim Lanier. But I guess it was a fortunate thing that it was Jim Lanier, because I love all the other mushers and I would have done the same thing for him. But I mean, Jim has been a buddy of mine for 33 years. So it was kind of appropriate,